Welcome to our interview with Darryl Anka. Half the interview is done with me and Darryl only, and then for the second half of the interview, Anthony joins me for part two. Welcome, welcome, everyone. We are here with Darryl Anka, who we had the opportunity to meet at Conscious Life Expo a month or so ago. So before we get started, I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Darryl Anka has been a channeler of spiritual wisdom for over 40 years. He is known for his teachings and messages from an ET from the future known as Bashar, who we're going to talk about today. Along with Edgar Casey, Seth, and Abraham Hicks, the Bashar material has been recognized around the world. In addition to channeling Bashar, Darryl expresses his creative talents through writing, directing, and producing films through his own production company, Zia Films. His documentary, which he wrote, produced, and directed, entitled First Contact, explores his life as a channel and the messages Bashar shares through him. So, such a fascinating background. I cannot wait to dive in. So, thanks again for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So one of the things I love to do in the beginning of interviews like this, and we've had, lots of different kind of people on this show, our hope is to really bridge the spirituality and the science that still people today try to keep separated.
Yes, I understand. I think a lot of it's coming together, though, more and more.
I do too. I do too. And it's exciting to see that actually. So I always like to rewind the clock a little bit. Let's rewind back to the 1970s because there's definitely people who are watching this today who are not as experienced with your work and who are not going to all the UFO conferences around the country.
Right.
So you had an experience or a couple of them in the 1970s when you had close range broad daylight sightings of UFOs. Can you describe that experience for us?
Yeah, it was in 1973. And the first time I was driving from West Los Angeles back into the San Fernando Valley, and I had a friend with me, my brother, my sister, and the brother of the friend also. And as we were coming down the hill into the valley on the freeway, I started noticing that there were some lights hovering above this hotel in the distance, and it wasn't, they weren't moving. They were just staying there. Now I thought, well, that's just some sort of weird illusion. It's a plane, but because of the way it's moving and the way our car is moving, it makes it look like it's standing still. But the closer we got to it as we were coming down the hill, I started realizing, no, this is not moving at all. So it's like a helicopter hovering over it, the hotel or whatever. But then I started drawing everyone's attention to the lights because we started realizing it wasn't a plane, it wasn't a helicopter. It was this black equilateral triangular UFO with blue white lights on each point and kind of a dull orange red light in the center underneath. And it was just hovering out in front of and above this hotel. So the hotel is a 12-story building, so I figured that this thing was about 150 feet up as we passed by. And as we passed it, it shot from one side of the freeway to the other. So as we were making a round to go into a different direction, it was again on my left, which is where it started. And then it just sort of shot over the valley like it was riding on a sheet of glass. It was so smooth. The motion was very unusual. There was no sound to it whatsoever. It was just very strange. And we all saw it, we all commented on it and thought, okay, we've seen a UFO. We don't know what this is. And then a week later, I was riding again in West Los Angeles with the same single friend that was with me the first time, just the two of us. And we were stopped at a red light at a major intersection. And all of a sudden, the same or similar craft just came across and flew over the intersection, and it was only like maybe 60, 70 feet up, and we were looking at each other and going, again, what's happening? Are we being invaded? What's going on here? So I literally just took the car to the right and turned through the residential neighborhood, and we tried to follow it because it was sort of zigzagging over the houses. It was a little hard to see because of all the trees, So my friend Tracy was leaning out the window and she was kind of like riding shotgun and going, "Oh, it's going that way. Turn left here, turn right there," because it was hard for me to see because of the roof of the car. So I followed her directions and we kind of at one point we lost track of it. And then just kind of on a feeling, I felt like I needed to make a hard right turn down this residential street. So I did, and then she yelled, "Stop." I slammed on the brakes. We looked out of the windows up, and this thing was just hovering like maybe 60 feet above the car. And within moments, it just shot up straight into the clouds and disappeared. And we got out of the car and we looked around the neighborhood to see if anyone else had seen it. And there wasn't a soul on the street. It was so strange. It was just like eerily quiet. No one was out watering their lawn, walking their dog, or anything. So only the two of us had seen this thing. So after that, I started investigating, well, what's this all about? Because, I'd always heard people say, oh, I've had a UFO sighting. But once you actually physically see something like that in broad daylight at close range, you know that when people say those things don't exist, that that's not true and that something else is going on and that there's another reality here. So I started investigating, looking for any book I could on, UFO encounters and what have you. And at the time, there wasn't really a whole lot of stuff. And so when you go to a bookstore in 1973, you've got like one shelf in a bookstore that has, any UFO, any psychic stuff, any channeling stuff. It's all right there. So I just kind of went down the line. I got familiar with things like the Seth material from Jane Roberts, so on and so forth. 10 years after the sighting, I was introduced to a channel who was conducting seminars at the time. I went to those seminars. I thought the information was very interesting and helpful. But eventually, the entity coming through that channel offered to actually teach a channeling class. Now, I went into the class not thinking I was going to be a channel. I just didn't understand how channeling could be taught. Because when I read stories like Jane Roberts and the channel that was teaching the class, it was just kind of like, I just sort of, this just sort of happened to them one day out of the blue. And I thought, well, if it's supposed to happen that way, how can you actually teach someone to be a channel? But during the class, which was a series of guided meditations over the course of many weeks, when we were in one of the meditations, I received what I can only describe as this telepathic contact that was just like somebody shoved a DVD into my brain all of a sudden in a split second. I understood that the UFO had been shown to me on purpose to get me to understand and start researching these things. I understood and remembered that I had made an agreement to do this in this life with Bashar. I understood that this was an opportunity for me to move forward or not. It was my choice if I was ready to do that. And I had an image of him, and the word Bashar just kind of appeared there in my brain. Now, I just thought, okay, this is the entity's name. I have later realized they don't have names, they're telepathic, but it was a word that was pulled somewhere from my background because I'm partly Arabic on my father's side. And the word I was told many years later, because I don't speak Arabic, actually means messenger or bringer of good news. So it was something that was somehow chosen out of my background to represent what he does. Now, in that class, this all happened in my head in a split second where I perceived all of this and I thought, is this a hallucination? Is it a side effect of the meditation that we were in? But the moment this happened, I hadn't said anything. And the entity coming through the channel stopped talking to the class and turned right to me and said, "There's an entity here for you now, if you're ready to begin." And I happened to glance behind me, and one of the other classmates had somehow picked up on the image of Bashar I saw in my head and was drawing his face on a piece of paper. So I
Wow.
automatically had two instances outside of my experience that said something real is happening here and other people are picking up on it. So I said, okay, I'll move forward with this. I'll see what happens. And I got better and better in the class, and eventually the teacher asked me to co-channel the next class with him, so I got even more practice. Then a woman came along who was doing a doctoral thesis paper on the connection between channeling and psychology, and I became one of her subjects for her paper. I would go to her house, I would channel for her friends, she would take her notes and write her paper. Word of mouth started to spread, and more people started showing up week after week when we were doing this. And pretty soon we had to do it 2 nights a week, and then had to do it in different houses, had to start renting auditoriums. I started getting asked to go to different cities, different countries, and here I am 40 years later, still doing it.
Wow. What an amazing story. I'm kind of curious though, psychologically and socially, like what were you doing at that time? I mean, in the early 1970s, you were probably pretty young, but did you have a profession that got overturned by this passion
Yes.
for channeling or
Well, but I did both simultaneously. I started out in a graphics studio. I was an artist. I've been drawing ever since I could pick up a pencil. So I was in a graphics studio, and then later in 1977, I joined a special effects miniature company that did miniatures for movies. And, we worked on like Star Trek and Iron Man and stuff like that. So I really had kind of like two parallel careers, one in the creative side in the film industry and the arts, and the other being the channeling. And they just sort of paralleled each other. So that's basically what I was doing, was both of those things.
now, was there any other catalyst, Daryl? I mean, obviously the UFO one is a big one. And as you were telling that story, I thought, yeah, they wanted you to see this, right? To experience it for yourself so that you could feel the experience and being able to share that with others. Was there any other catalyst between 73 and when you went to do that class that said, I really need to do this, something's calling me?
Well, again, there was just this drive to absorb information about all sorts of metaphysical things. I wasn't really sure, what that was all about, except that I just felt driven to start reading all of these things about different spiritual or metaphysical or UFO concepts. So it just kind of became something that I was gravitating to and I was attracted to very strongly. Now, of course, I understand in hindsight why the attraction. But at the time, it was just something that I was driven to do. And I also would get, and I still do, I'll get like a hit that I need to go to the bookstore, and every time I get that hit, I find something, a specific new book or something like that, that increases my understanding and my knowledge of experiences that other people have had with regard to either metaphysical experiences or near-death experiences or UFOs or things like that. So there's just this constant guidance going on, either from my spirit guides or whoever, that is just constantly allowing me to continually educate myself on what's going on, in that area of our lives, so that I'm sort of up to date. And Bashar can use information to talk to people about what's happening. So a lot of synchronicity like that is something that has continued in my life to this day, where I'll be guided to learn things and absorb information that will allow Bashar to talk to people about those things from a higher level. So that's always been going on.
So, there's different kinds of channels, right? And so you might describe it differently. My partner, Anthony, is a full embodied channel, and as well, that's what we call it. I'm curious what you call it because it is as if Bashar is, or can you explain that process, what's happening? Because you become something else.
Yeah, Bashar has sort of explained that what happens, this is sort of what's called a full telepathic contact. And the idea is that my brainwave frequency elevates, his brainwave frequency adjusts from wherever he is. Somewhere in the middle, we sort of meet and lock our frequencies like two tuning forks vibrating in synchronous harmony. And when that happens, in a sense, a third identity is formed that he refers to as the simulacrum. And that's what you're experiencing. You're not getting my personality, you're not getting his full personality, you're getting a third identity, a third entity that is presented to the audience that represents his thoughts and is a translation of his telepathic thoughts that he's sending through. Because he's not speaking English, he's not speaking anything. He's just transmitting his thoughts. My brain has been trained to translate those thoughts into the language that I was raised to understand, which is English. But it's that third identity that's created between the both of us that people are experiencing in a channeling event. So I understand that as a telepathic connection, that's all about frequency and resonance and matching frequencies so that the effect of that we call channeling can occur.
Now, do you think there's actually a merging happening?
In a sense, yes,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm describing is sort of a blending of our frequencies. I become a little bit more like him, he becomes a little bit more like me, and we create that third identity that people experience in a channeling event. So yeah, and it's definitely, rubbed off on me more and more and more as the years have gone by. I've become a lot more like him in the sense of using his principles in my life much more frequently and getting the effect of doing that. So it's all about me becoming more of who I am. That's what the channeling is training me to do, as well as being of service to others by bringing through that information. But it's also for the channel to improve themselves and become as best as possible more of their fullest self, more of the expression of their own spirit and soul uh, into physical reality. So yeah, it works on multiple levels that way.
Yeah, that's amazing, actually. You have your avatar self as your teacher. How miraculous is that?
Yeah, but we all kind of do. We all
Yeah.
have access to that in different ways and different expressions. And like you said, there are different forms of channeling. There's vocal channeling, there's just intuitive, you're picking up on things and just talking what you're getting as your normal self, so to speak. There's automatic writing, there's things like, tarot reading and, all that kind of stuff puts you in the same kind of state. It's like whatever device or permission slip, as Bashar says, works for you, allows you more efficacy at connecting to your higher mind, to those higher energy and frequency states that allow you to bring through information that is of service to other people. So that's, in my understanding, how it all sort of works. But it's expressed differently through different people based on what works for them, what they gravitate to in terms of their expression of that connection. Because everyone channels when they're doing something they love to do, they get into a channeling state. It's called gamma in the brain. It's between 40 and 100 cycles or higher in the physical brain. And anytime you're doing what you love to do, you're not paying attention to the passage of time. You do something, you think it feels like maybe 20 minutes has gone by, you look up and it's been like 3 hours. You've been in a channeling state because that's one of the effects is the collapse of time in that state. So everyone can do it and everyone does do it. It's a natural altered state that we all get into when we get in the zone, so to speak, and we're really highly focused on something that completely absorbs us. Even a deep meditation can put you into a channeling state. So there are many access points to it and many expressions of it.
And when you first started channeling, was the experience the same? You know how it's sort of it kind of takes over, your voice becomes different, you become kind of you go into this expanded state of awareness or consciousness. Was it like that at the very beginning, or how
Well,
has it?
yes and no. The difference, the main difference was the ability to handle the higher frequency energy. Because at first, every time I would go into or be about to go into channeling, like maybe 24 hours ahead, I would feel like I was coming down with a cold or a fever or a flu. I would get pains in the back of my neck, pains in different parts of my body, because later I understood that when your body is not used to handling much higher frequency energy, which is coming from the entities, it's almost like that energy is trying to push its way through constrictions in your nervous system. And that can be somewhat painful. But every time I actually then started the channeling, all of those symptoms went away. And it took me about 2 years before I got used to the energy enough that I didn't experience any of those effects anymore. And the channeling actually started to sort of lift me up and energize me. And then from that point forward, after channeling, it's always left me with more energy and a more balanced state. But it took a couple of years for me to sort of clear out my attic, so to speak, of assumptions, fear-based beliefs, negative beliefs, limitations, ideas of what I was supposed to be doing with all of this, for it to relax and get through my body and my nervous system in a much more effortless way. So that's not necessarily uncommon for people to experience those kinds of symptoms when they first start channeling, especially if they're connecting to a higher frequency entity.
And also, the fact that it is a full embodied kind of telepathic experience for you versus, a lot of times we refer to it as mental mediumship, right? You get
Right.
the downloads.
Right. And
Uh,
then you say what you're getting. Yeah.
yeah, but you're not in that altered state that people see with your channeling.
You are, yeah, you're in a slightly altered state, but not that expression of an altered state. And the reason I think that this sort of version happens a lot is because it's a more 3D, fuller translation device because you're getting the body language, the nuances, and all of the things that really give more fullness to the information coming through, because it gives you the effect that you really are talking to the entity itself. And therefore, that simulation is a more full body simulation so that you can relate to it as its own entity and you realize that a true shift has been made. So I think it's just a convenience that is helpful for humanity because it's easier for them to relate to something that is then presenting itself in full, shall we say, 3D format, where you get every little nuance, you get the motions, the body language, the accents, whatever goes along with that, that helps emphasize and send the information through in, the most complete possible way. That's just, I think one reason. It doesn't mean it's necessary, but I think that's why it happens that way. It's just easier for people to relate to as another person.
um, in the early days. Did you have any protocols that you went through?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, because of the meditations that were given in the class that I took that I mentioned, there was a particular process of relaxing the body and relaxing the mind. And so I used to kind of go through that a bit. So it would take me, like a few minutes to sort of get into the right state. And once I started doing that, though, and once the channeling became more common, then I just got used to the energy. And now, I can just go into it because I know what it feels like. I don't need to go through that process anymore. I can just
Right.
drop into it within like 60 seconds because I understand what I'm looking for energetically. I know what that feeling is like. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's amazing, right? Because you can go in and out just like that now.
Yeah. But that's what 40 years does for you.
Absolutely. Now with Anthony here.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd love to talk about channeling protocols because one of the differences between 1983 and now is that more and more people are opening up to channeling,
Yeah.
and some are afraid, some are excited and thrilled and, actually brought this in, but some have this Kundalini awakening kind of accidentally. Do
Yeah.
you have some suggestions for, based on the process that you went through to have to maintain a tight ship, so to
Yeah.
speak, so that they're not always knocking at your door?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, you have to remember it's up to you. You always have the free will to say yes or no to whatever you're connecting to. If you're not ready for it, say, give me a moment, or back off. Let me, get into the proper state. Let me research this. Let me feel what I need to feel. You always are in control of that. If you're dealing with real entities and stuff like that, they will always respect that. So there's no reason to fear that. You're never going to be forced to do anything. You're the one in charge of how you do that. Secondly, as I said, channeling is a natural altered state. Everyone does it. And they may do it without even knowing they're doing it. Like I said, when you do something you love to do, when you fall into that zone, you're already shifting into a channeling state. So it's not like it's a weird, unnatural thing to do. So again, on that level, there's nothing to be afraid of. You probably have done it many times in your life without even knowing it. Third, in terms of things like vocal channeling, because that's really what I can speak to, along with maybe tarot reading, which I also used to do before I started channeling.
Mhm.
Um, in this way was a lot of times if you want to be a vocal channel, sometimes it really helps to actually have people asking questions who really want to know the answers. Now, you have to kind of get out of your own way about, am I going to get an accurate answer? Am I going to look silly? Am I going to, get anything at all? You really have to let all of that go. But when people are actually asking questions and you're there trying to help provide an answer for them, it helps you kind of get out of the way, because when you're just doing it for yourself, it can kind of go around in your own brain and go, am I getting this? Is it accurate? Is whatever? And there's nowhere for the information to go other than in you. But if somebody's asking a question, it's almost functioning like electricity seeking a ground. It almost like the question pulls the information through you to them, the one that's asking the question. And therefore you can really just kind of get out of the way and see what you get. You really become more of just an open conduit or a vessel for the information to come through you and ground itself in the person that's asking the question. So it really helps, at least in my experience, to have people who are seriously asking questions they want to know the answers to do that for the channel, so the channel can practice feeling what that's like, to just let the information come through to them and to be of service to that person, to be in a state of intending to be service, and then getting out of your own way with any judgment or anything about what it is you're getting, whether you sound silly, whether the information is accurate, or anything along that line. And it's okay to get nothing at all. And you can always start with the caveats like, look, I'm practicing. This is relatively new for me. So I'm going to get what I'm going to get, or I may not get anything. But you're giving me an opportunity by asking these questions to practice this, so I can get better and better and better at recognizing and the frequencies and feelings as to what I'm getting and what I'm connecting to and all that. And it doesn't really matter. You have to let go of the idea of where you're getting it from, because as long as you have the intention to be of service to people, it'll be something that you'll connect to vibrationally that's positive, whether it's your own higher mind, whether it's a spirit guide, whether it's an angelic being, whether it's a member of your soul family, whether it's a parallel reality, whether it's whatever. You don't have to determine necessarily right away what it is. If there's a reason why it should present itself to you in a specific way and give you a specific identity, then it will eventually do so. But at first, a lot of times, when you're not used to it, you're connecting and consolidating and integrating different aspects of your own personality. You may be starting with your own higher mind, or you may be integrating aspects of your own personality that have been, maybe shoved off to the side for some reason or another. And that process of integration continues through the entire, period of your channeling. That's still going on for me. So it just, becomes better and better. You become more accurate. It's just like anything. You practice like playing the piano. You just get better and better and better at it. You start recognizing when you might be a little off key or something like that more easily, until you know what that frequency is supposed to feel like. You get your ego out of the way and you are just doing it to be of service to humanity. And then you just let whatever comes through come through. That's how it works.
Really love that answer. I mean, that answer is so spot on, don't you think? It's unbelievable. That's the best answer I've ever heard, really, for
Thank you.
describing how the process works, because I remember reading on your website, you talked about in the beginning when you were doing those courses, you're like, God, I don't know who this is or if it's
Yeah.
real or whatever, but you kind of said, even if it is my higher mind, who cares?
Who cares?
Because
Yeah.
I just love
I'm
that.
doing it to be of service. I'm doing it to be of help. I know, therefore, that that's my intention, and that's what's going to guide this.
Yeah.
And whatever comes through is what needs to come through. You have to trust the process. You have to trust the timing, and you have
Yeah.
to trust that it's a journey for you as well as for the people asking the questions, and you
Yeah.
have to learn from it.
Absolutely, it's symbiotic.
Let me think here. Bashar,
Hmm.
how much is this entity? Well, we know that this entity it's your higher self, if you will.
Well, yes and
Is
no.
yes and no.
It's one way of looking at the connection. I have to use my higher self to connect to him, but he is another entity as well. So, as I was explaining, it's like the shifts in my brainwaves and the shifts in his brainwave connect and a third entity is formed that you get when you experience the channeling. Bashar represents it and calls it a simulacrum. It's a simulation, a third entity that represents the channeling experience. So it's my higher self is involved in the process, but I wouldn't go so far as to say Bashar is literally my higher self, because I have my own higher self, he has his own higher self, and the higher selves are involved in the process, but I wouldn't label him as literally my higher self.
So your higher self, his higher self, come together
Mhm.
to form, to create.
It's a co-collaboration.
Yeah, a third entity that you experience in the channeling that we call Bashar. Because you're not getting his personality literally, you're not getting my personality literally, you're getting a combination of the two, which forms a third entity that people recognize in the channeling events as Bashar, which simply means messenger.
Yes, I love that. It's
Yeah.
just, I think this is so helpful for people
Yeah.
who, I mean, there's people in the world where we met, we are part of that world too, Conscious Life Expo. And then there's people in the real world who are watching this and don't have this experience of understanding what you're talking about. And I think the idea of frequency, if
Mhm.
we can collectively as a community get people to really understand what's happening there, it's no longer this pseudoscience. It's actually
Right.
real.
Well, I think that's where metaphysics and physics will actually come together, is the idea of resonance and frequency of energy, because it's all about frequency. It's all about energy. It's all about different states that are represented by different frequencies in the brain, in the energy field, so on and so forth. I mean, even a lot of quantum physicists are now beginning to talk about things like the consciousness field, and stuff like that. So I know a lot of scientists sort of don't like making connections and references from a metaphysical point of view, but I do think that at some point it's going to be inevitable that those things have to come together, because if a lot of the metaphysical experiences, as I believe them to be, are real experiences, they have to be based in physics. Even if it's a higher level of understanding of physics, it's still physics. And this is one of the things that I appreciate about the information that comes through Bashar, is that he grounds it in the idea that, look, I'm just explaining to you mechanically, physics wise, how all metaphysical things work. There is a way to understand it from a physics point of view, and it's all about resonance, frequency, energy, so on and so forth. So I think that's where those two worlds of metaphysics and physics will ultimately unite.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great parallel. Lee Carroll is also in our series. We interviewed him. We talked about crying and the magnetic field, and it's very similar. You hear that from a lot of channels. It comes through us as well, that it's all about this resonance.
Mhm.
Right. Right. Because everything's a matter of frequency, because we're all one thing. The only way that there are quote unquote differences is it's a difference in frequency, just as an analogy, the visible spectrum of light. It's all electromagnetic energy, but we see red at one frequency, blue at another frequency, green at another frequency. But it's all electromagnetic energy. So it's all the same thing. The difference is in the frequency of that thing. And I think that's extending out into all of creation. So the fact that you and I are different is because of a difference in the frequency of our particular reflection of the same one thing we're all made out of.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what's fascinating for us to see these worlds come together. I mean, we're channeling ascended masters and, very, very different energies. However, what I think is fascinating, what's happening right now, is that all the messages keep overlapping. It's this oneness, this unity consciousness, humanity, get it together,
Right.
all from different vantage points. And so,
Well, it's time for
it's,
that to happen. Yeah.
yeah, it's time for that to happen. How has channeling Bashar changed? In other words, like his messages that came through early on, what were they vis-a-vis today? Because we can handle so much more today in terms
Well,
of our
right.
inner awareness.
So at first he would deliver maybe larger concepts, and over time he's able to dive deeper into the specifics of why those concepts work and provide literal instruction manuals for it works this way. Here's step A, step B, step C, step D, and this is why that works. So he's been able to go from the larger to the more, detailed explanations as time has gone on and as I've allowed more of his personality to come through. So that way, and it's going to lead to me actually teaching a class as myself, because I know that in any, 90-minute to 2-hour session with Bashar, you can only cover so much. But by creating a class on the subject of his concepts and really having hours and hours to explore it over the course of days, you can really dive down to why does that work? How does that work? How can you practice making that work? How can you apply this into this situation in your life and that situation in your life? So developing a real deep understanding physically of how these concepts actually work, applying them in your life and getting a result will really help anchor some of these concepts into people so they can use them on a daily basis and not leave them as just sort of a nebulous concept up here somewhere as an intellectual exercise. It needs to be grounded in practical action, and you get an actual result from that. So I'll be teaching the class, which I'm calling the Unified Theory of Metaphysics, at some point, probably next year, and will allow people an opportunity over the course of several days to really dive down into every single principle that Bashar has talked about. And it creates a framework, or will create a framework, uh, that you can use to look at different metaphysical phenomena and say, well, it fits the framework here. These are all interconnected. It works because of this principle. And then by using that framework as a filtering system, you can also understand the difference between what we've been experiencing as metaphysical phenomena for thousands of years and what the actual underlying cause of those things are. Because there can be a big difference between a description of the experience and a description of the mechanism that's actually making it work. And I think for the 21st century, we need to start understanding how do these things actually happen? What's the real physical mechanism behind this metaphysical or spiritual experience, as opposed to just sticking with the experiential definition. Bashar uses the example of a sunset to sort of describe this idea, because we still call a sunset a sunset. Now, in this day and age, we understand the sun is not setting, it's not moving, but the earth is spinning, and that causes the illusion of the sun rising and setting. But we still say sunset. So it's okay to say sunset as long as you understand the sun is not actually moving. It's the earth that's moving and the earth that's spinning that causes that effect. So that's what he is attempting to do. And what the class will attempt to do is there's a big difference between the description of the experience and a description of what's the actual mechanism that's causing that experience. And there's a lot of that to unpack in a lot of metaphysical experiences that we have been having for thousands of years, to bring it into the 21st century so that we really have an understanding of what's going on and how to use it more efficiently and effectively in our lives, instead of just going off of, well, it's this because that's what it feels like, instead of, no, it's this because that's what's actually happening. You can still hold on to the feeling, just know the difference between a description of the experience and a description of the mechanism.
Yeah, and I think that's important right now as more channelers are kind of emerging, because, there's still the pseudoscience that gets shut down. I mean, Dr. Shamini Jain is in this series, right? She went to Yale and studied, has all these peer-reviewed reviews on the biofield and what's happening. But morphic resonance, right? Right?
Yeah.
That talk got checkmarked as pseudoscience. So we're still getting this pushback, it's changing. It's definitely changing. I mean, I love, books like Helene Wabe's Science of Channeling, right? That really helps explain what's actually going on here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some misconceptions that do exist. There are things that aren't quite a scientific approach, but a lot of it, rather than being called pseudoscience, should simply be called natal science. It's the beginning of an understanding of something that we haven't really understood for quite a while, but will eventually enter the scientific realm. Like I said, I do think that metaphysical experiences are real experiences and can be explained if we expand our understanding of physics. So that'll eventually come together. It doesn't mean that there aren't misunderstandings and approaches that aren't really representative of a scientific thing, but not all of it is just pseudoscience and shouldn't be labeled that way, because it just dismisses a lot of things simply because they don't understand what the underlying mechanism is. And that's what I was talking about, is a lot of times the irony is that the people that debunk these things are debunking the experiential expression, which of course is wrong because it's not an accurate description of the underlying mechanism. So when they debunk the experiential definition, they think they've debunked everything, instead of understanding that they're also buying into the idea just because it's being presented in a misunderstood way by the people experiencing it. They're buying into their experiential definition as if it's the real underlying cause, when it's not.
Yeah, that's
So
right, Darryl,
that has to change. Yeah,
yeah,
because there are rules and laws that govern things like ESP and psychic functioning and certain conditions that have to exist for those things to work. But when they do a lot of scientific testing for those things, they actually often eliminate many of the factors that are necessary for those things to actually happen, because they're taking an approach that they've learned, like removing emotion from an experience, but emotion is absolutely necessary for psychic functioning to work properly. So when you go into a lab and say, all right, we're going to sterilize this whole process and remove emotion from the equation, you have essentially killed your experiment right there.
yeah. I mean, our guides will always say we work through your heart, not your minds.
Right. Well, both.
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 Yeah, speaking about the heart, I don't think to it, but I feel into it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's for me, it's a heart opener. For you, is it more of a mental process, or is it a combination of both
It's a
emotional?
combination. It's a combination because, like I said, I've learned to feel what that state is, and I just fall into the feeling.
Right.
I know that there's a lot of mentality that is activated that goes with it, because you have to have the mental side to translate it into a language.
Right.
But it's not something I'm thinking about. I'm just feeling the experience and it's automatically translating. So I know that my neurological brain net is involved, but it's on automatic. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not trying to make it happen. I'm just letting the energy run through it in the way that it needs to run through it. And in order to do that, I kind of, like you said, I just have to fall into the feeling or the sensation of the entire experience. I can't piecemeal it or think about it. Otherwise, I would stop it.
Yes.
Mm.
When you first started opening as a channel, were there energies that started coming to you as a result of your opening? Or was it only one entity?
You mean besides Bashar?
Beside Bashar?
Well, yeah, Bashar was there right from the get-go, but it was a little difficult for me to handle the level of energy that he presented. And so he would come through intermittently, but in actual fact, I started channeling more often a female from his society that we referred to as Anima. Her energy was easier for me to take. And I practiced a lot with her to get ready to handle him.
Yes.
Over the course of time, as I opened up more and more, a few different entities also made an appearance, but at that point, it was more Bashar helping to facilitate them coming through temporarily for short periods of time to deliver a specific message. But then at this point, it's Bashar 99% of the time.
Right.
That's amazing.
No, I mean, personally too, I feel exactly the same
Yeah,
thing. It
just
seems
the
like we channeled everything, but everything was like this,
yeah.
and then it just came
Well, he talked about it earlier in the interview where
very
it feels
precise.
like they're coming through and they're trying to expand in this limited physical
Yeah.
shell of ours.
Right. And that's why you have to kind of get out of the way and clean out your attic of any beliefs or limitations that prevent that from happening to the fullest extent that it can. Now, I understand also, even though it may not express itself in the way that people recognize it's there, but as Bashar has said, look, when I'm talking to you, I'm telepathically connected to literally hundreds of other entities.
Yeah.
And they're paying attention and they're feeding information to me and through me,
Right.
but they're not necessarily identifying themselves. So we all have spirit teams, spirit guides, angelic beings, ETs, soul family. And in any channeling, they may actually all be involved in providing information. But the one entity or the few entities that are acting as the facilitators are consolidating all that information so that we're not having to deal with 1,500 different entities in a channeling. It's easier for humans to absorb when it's coming through what appears to be a couple of personalities at the most. So in a sense, Bashar is like the front man for hundreds of other beings that are part of my spirit team, just as every single person has their own spirit team. So whatever it is you're doing as a channeling modality, be it tarot reading or automatic writing or vocal channeling or what have you, your entire team to some degree is involved. Different guides may have different skills and may take over at one point more than another or trade off when their skill needs to be brought to bear. But basically, you have all of us have teams that are behind us for this physical adventure. And any channeling, I can sense the connection between all of them, but again, they're not all going to go, hi, it's me, now it's me, now it's me. That would just be too confusing. So basically, it is a multi-dimensional, multi-entity experience, but you're getting the consolidated end of that, of course, because it's just easier for us to absorb.
I think that's a really great explanation, actually, because, when you think about Seth or, early channelers too,
Mhm.
they may not have been as aware as we are today that it's collective. I mean, certainly with Abraham Hicks,
Sure.
that's a collective that was known to be a collective. And so
Right.
I think it's important to reemphasize that because a lot of times when people open up, they're like, well, who's my spirit guide, singular? And
Yeah, and there can be at a given moment in your life one guide that predominates. But usually we have anywhere from one to three or more. And again, they all have their own skill levels. I think we have to understand that in the spirit realm, there are still spirits who are learning things, and there are still spirits who are specializing in things because they're better at it. They have more experience at it. And so they do trade off, and you may not even realize they've traded off. You're getting information, but you may be getting information from another spirit guide that was there 5 minutes ago. So, it just depends on what they bring. But having to stop and say, well, who is it now? Who is it now? Who is it now? Is too much of an interruption in the flow. The important thing is the flow of the information, not who's delivering it at any given moment, unless there's some specific reason why you should know.
yeah,
So a lot of times it's like not so much going, all right, well, now is this my second spirit guide? Is it my third spirit guide? Is it my own higher mind? Is it an angelic being? Is it a soul family member? Is it an ET? I mean, you'd spend the entire channeling doing that. There would be no information. You'd just be trying to figure out who's on board. So it's really just about knowing that they work as a team. They've got that all figured out. They're
yeah.
going to deliver the information in the smoothest possible way, the most efficient possible way. So, generally speaking, whether you know it's a collective or not, whether it's presented as a collective or not, it's going to be funneled in a way that makes sense for us to receive that information in the easiest and most efficient way.
God, what a great explanation. That sort of leads me to, because we've had some moments too, right? Where they're indescribable. funny moments. Can
Mhm.
you talk about, was there, a time that you can remember? Maybe you were channeling for a group, maybe not. Maybe it was just a aha, silly moment with a friend, but where it just kind of blew your mind.
Well, I mean, first of all, people have often commented on the fact that Bashar has a lot of humor and
Yeah.
will often, in a sense, say funny things and make jokes.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that happens. They're definitely, a species that has humor, and the spirits have humor too. I mean, it lightens things up, literally, vibrationally, to approach things from a more humorous point of view. I mean, I think one of my favorites was when, somebody asked Bashar, does your civilization have movies and TV? And he says, no, we just come watch you, you know, because we're the biggest show in town as far as he's concerned. The most ridiculous and bizarre things are happening on Earth, and so they get a lot out of just seeing what's going on here. So he made that point kind of humorously. Another person, are you familiar with SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence? Talked to him in a channeling event and said, oh, I'm from SETI, the search for extraterrestrial. And Basar just piped up, well, search over, here I am, you know. So, stuff like that he'll quip about, and then, he'll go in and explain things, maybe in a more serious way so that people get it. But he's absolutely not without humor.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that we really enjoy about your channeling. Actually, it's awesome. And it's down to earth and very authentic.
Yeah, yeah, that's what helps because people have to relate to it. And he understands that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we really love about you is, we came from LA at that event and there's people have been channeling for 2 years and running around thinking that they're the big show of the day. And there you are, 40 years of work and you're just humble and talking to everybody. And,
Well,
it
it's
was
just what happened to me. I like helping people. I like being of service. I'll go out of my way to help someone. So it's just what I do. And the humble thing, the humility is really just a way of saying, look, you have your life and I have my life. This is where the lives cross, where I'm delivering this information, but it's up to you to decide what to do with it. It's not up to me. I have my own life, and I don't want your life to be my life and my life to be your life. You get to make your own decisions. You get to be autonomous. And that allows me to be autonomous in making decisions in my life. So it's really just a matter of honoring the idea that everyone has their own path. I have my own path, and being willing to preserve that for you and for myself. You know, I don't need to live your life. I don't need to control what you're thinking or what you want to do. I give you information, and in the way that Bashar does is like, look, take it or leave it. I know the information works because I've had the experience that it works. I know it can work for you because other people have come back and said, gosh, when I applied what Bashar said, my entire life changed for the better. So I understand that the important thing is that the information proves itself to be working. You don't even have to believe that Bashar is real. The information proves that it works. And that's really the most important point, and one of the reasons why they stay in the background. They don't want you to focus on them. They want you to focus on applying the information to make your own life better. And
Mhm.
that's really what counts.
Yeah, and that's really, I would say, it's the quality of a master, right? It's not about them, it's about the information and it's about serving.
Yeah,
That's,
absolutely. Because when you're serving the whole, you get served
yeah,
because you're part of the whole. It's how things work. You have to have a holistic system focus and be part of it. If you're just serving yourself, you're cutting yourself off from the whole and all the things that could be helping you too, because you're isolating yourself and compartmentalizing yourself and creating a cutting off experience. Not that you can be cut off, but you can create the experience of being cut off. But if you're serving the whole that you're a part of, it's reciprocal. You get what you need.
yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Darryl, how do you, after 40 years, how do you take care of yourself physically in order to control all of this energy that's constantly
Well,
coming?
I try my best to eat well. I don't always succeed, but I try my best to eat well. I'm my wife and I own an escape room here in Los Angeles, and both from working in the film industry where I'm used to building sets and props and still now doing that to build sets and props for the escape room, I am constantly physically doing things that are like workouts because building sets, building props is a lot of physical work. And so I have that kind of exercise in my life on a daily basis, and I've had that for years and years and years. I don't really do anything else. I walk a lot. I walk a lot. So I have that. I have the thing that acts as physical labor to build these things, but that's fun. It's part of my excitement to do that, and I'm glad that I can. But basically, it's mostly about the attitude. It's mostly about the energy, staying centered, staying balanced. Uh, Learning from Bashar how to respond to things instead of reacting to things, approaching all challenges with more curiosity rather than reacting like, oh no, there's a problem. It's like, oh, well, what's this about? What can I learn from this? How is this going to help me? What lesson am I learning here? How is this going to improve me by this challenge coming up? Because every time I do that, it always creates a benefit, no matter what it is. So I've learned from his principles how to respond to life rather than react to life. And that makes all the difference in terms of what I'm guided to do. That also helps maintain me physically. Plus, the very act of channeling itself is something that also slows down, in a sense, the aging process in a lot of ways, because time is very collapsed in a channeling state. And as Bashar said, like that whole thing, like when you're doing something you love to do and it feels like 15 minutes has passed, but you look up and it's been a couple of hours. Well, he's saying if you only actually truly feel like 15 minutes has passed, you've only aged 15 minutes, not 2 hours. So living in the moment, living in the present, actually reduces the amount of time passage that you experience, because time and space are our projections of consciousness anyway. They're not, in a sense, real things outside of us. So by living more in the present, you don't experience the passage of time as much, and paradoxically, you age less and live longer.
1 second.
Great.
Hold the phones. So you're saying the more I channel, the younger I will continue.
The younger you will continue to stay.
I like that.
That's true of anyone. I mean, even just look at, people who are, in what we call advanced age, who are still very active. Even if they look mature, they still have the energy of a younger person, and they're still doing things that a younger person typically would do. And you see their spirit, you see their energy, and they're not slowing down really. They're still very active. So we see that in practical applications for someone who maintains that energy and lives for the moment, lives in the present.
For the moment. And dancing, I would add, because I've been a swing dancer my whole life.
Cool.
I'm always like the thing that, you're not supposed to get on social media and go down a rabbit hole, but the ones that I do are with all the 95 to 102-year-olds dancing. I just love to see that.
Right, yeah.
Are there, again, over all these years of channeling, are there any physical manifestations that have occurred to you that
As a result of channeling?
Well, you mean aside from not necessarily aging so much?
That too.
All right. I mean, I don't know. How old would you guess I am?
How old do I think you are? Wait a second.
I won't be offended.
About 50.
You look fit. I would say, wait, I don't want to get this wrong. Let me think here. For some reason,
Don't do the math. Don't do the math. Just go off of what you see.
70?
You're doing the math, though. He's asking how old does he look? He looks
I'm
50.
feeling in my heart here.
Yeah, I'll be 74 in October. It's that idea, it doesn't really much matter that the body will mature, but I still have the energy that I had, 20 years ago in terms of doing all the things that I'm doing. So
I guess what I wanted to say, do you feel like tingling in your body? Do you feel things like tinnitus or
tinnitus.
tinnitus,
No.
ringing in your ears, your body like feel electric or anything like that?
Well, it can feel the energy vibrations, absolutely, but it depends on what I'm doing. Depends on how I'm flowing the energy through myself. It's not
Yeah.
a constant thing.
Yeah, it's not resistant. So speaking of that, this is a great segue to one of Bashar's top principles,
Yeah,
and that is that you are non-physical consciousness at experiencing physical reality. Can you
right.
speak about that? 'Cause that to me is one of my favorite
Yes.
topics, and really trying to get our linear brains
Yeah.
around trying to understand that.
Well, imagine, okay, first of all, when people say, well, do we have a soul? That's the wrong question. You are a soul. That's what you are. That's your natural state. It's an energy state of consciousness. So for now, as a way of understanding or explaining this, imagine that as a soul, you are a sphere of energy. This is what the soul form takes when you're not projecting yourself as an actual entity. It goes back to a natural state of simply being a sphere of energy. That's the simplest form. So imagine that you're this sphere of energy. Now imagine that the soul decides it wants to have a physical experience. Imagine that this sphere of energy has certain vibrational patterns within it, like ripples in a pond, okay? Each of those ripples represents a different concept within the soul. So the soul says, okay, I'm going to have a life path that I'm going to experience certain challenges, certain opportunities, certain experiences. So those experiences, those challenges are represented by this vibration of energy, this ripple of energy. I'm going to take those specific ripples and I'm going to focus them down into the center of my being. I'm going to focus on those. So that doesn't mean the sphere disappears. It's still there, but it's taken a few different vibrational patterns within it, and it has made them the focus at the center of the sphere. That focus of those vibrational patterns, that concentration of those vibrational patterns within the soul is what we call the experience of physical reality. It's what creates the physical personality. It's what creates the belief systems that go along with that personality that determine what challenges we're going to face in that particular life experience. But all of that is happening at the center of the soul. The soul is not leaving the spirit realm to go into the physical reality. It's more accurate than saying the body has a soul to say the soul has a body, because
Mm.
it's all happening within our consciousness. It's not happening outside of it. There is no outside. So the idea is it's that concentration focus that kind of crystallizes this personality entity aspect of the soul for that particular lifetime. Then, when the soul maybe learns certain things, it expands a little bit and maybe has an astral projection, or maybe has psychic functioning, or maybe has a near-death experience. And when it dies, goes back to its full sphere, like that.
Mm.
And now, okay, I'm going to have another experience. So I'm going to take this vibrational pattern and this vibrational pattern, and I'm going to put those into my focus at the center. And now you have another incarnation. But
Mm.
all of that is happening like the soul is breathing inside itself. Life after life after life after life is just all the different patterns in the soul focusing down to the center for a specific purpose, a specific experience, but all of that's happening within the soul. Spirit is your natural state. You never leave it. We're there right now. We're just dreaming that we've left. That's what physical reality is.
So are we having a perception? Does the
Mm.
soul create a perception of its own physical reality
Yes.
that's occurring at this moment?
That's what I'm saying. Yes. And we do
Interesting.
this by agreement, so that my soul is agreeing with your soul that we will share certain aspects. All life paths are intertwined. We will share certain aspects of our life path so we can act as if we're in the same reality. We're not.
Well, when you said something earlier that really resonated with me, I get that download. Go to the bookstore, right? And like suddenly a book will fly off the shelf and you don't know why. So I get that kind of download. Do you think synchronicities, like what's happening right here, happen in a
Every,
certain kind of way? Like it's almost like
everything,
we all have antennas and
everything is synchronicity. Everything is an orchestration. It doesn't mean it always has to have the highest meaning for you.
yeah.
It could be for someone else, but you're involved. You're a part of the orchestration. So let's say you're in a traffic jam. Now, whatever it is you're going through in that traffic jam while you're sitting in your car may be a lesson for you, but it may be a lesson for someone else, and you're just willing to participate by helping create the traffic jam that they need to experience to learn the lesson they need to learn. It's all an orchestration. There are no accidents. It's all intertwined. So it's our sensitivity to that fact, our awareness of the fact that everything is synchronicity that allows us to more consciously experience more of it. So all we're doing is expanding our awareness of the fact that everything is already synchronicity, interconnected, and an orchestration that we've all co-created by agreement from a higher level for our
If
own.
everything is of synchronicity, which I understand you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here. So
Sure.
everything happens due to synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, if that's the case, then there is no good and there is no bad. There simply is.
There is positive and negative energies, positive being collective, expansive, negative being segregative, diminishing. That's a mechanical description.
Is
But you
that a
can
perception of reality as well?
positive and negative exist on every level. It's how you experience them, how you use them, that determines the effect you have in your particular experience. Remember, you can use negative mechanical energy for positive reasons and positive mechanical energy for negative reasons. For example, we're using a negative concept right now to bring ourselves into a physical focus in order to have this experience because we're placing limitations on our greater self. So
Mm.
that's a mechanically negative act of limitation, but for the positive reason to help our soul grow by having this more limited experience and transforming it. So it's just about positive and negative energy. It's not really the subjective idea of what's good and bad. We can recognize when someone might be out of alignment with themselves, with their true vibration, and be expressing more negative mechanisms in their life because they may not understand how else to do that, how else to connect, how else to reach out. It's all an expression of love, but the opposite expression of love is fear. So when
So it's
people
all an
operate out,
expression of love. I like that.
Yeah.
yes, it's all an expression of an attempt to express love. But if people don't have the understanding that we're all connected and how to do that, and that they're as powerful as they need to be already to get what they need without having to hurt themselves or anyone else, then they may be missing a few tools in their toolkit and they may lash out at others. They may try to control their reality in negative ways because they simply are missing the understanding that they're already connected and that they can already automatically attract what they need. But so it's a matter of us as a collective consciousness expanding our awareness and learning that we are already powerful beings. We're already indestructible souls. And we have to let go of these ideas of negative limitation and lack of self empowerment and lack of connection and lack of spirituality. We're through a experience. We're getting through an experience of remembering who we are by forgetting who we are, so that we can discover ourselves from a new point of view, expand our souls together collectively and individually, and rise to a new level. So this is the journey that we're creating the Earth experience to be. Earth is a school of cycles. We're a master graduating class, learning to let go of the things that no longer are necessary for us to realize who we are through the methodologies we've been using for thousands of years. It's time to go to another class. It's time to graduate.
move on from limited belief systems that we've been conditioned by that no longer serve us.
Exactly.
Certainly no longer will never really serve the collective, although you could look at it
Well, a
that way.
different collective might want to use them,
That's
but
right.
those that are awakening to spiritual understanding are kind of done with that class. You need to go to the next class. You need to graduate. You don't want to repeat the class. You don't want to go to summer school. You want to graduate.
You don't want to repeat
So
outdated ways of thinking, right? And
exactly. It's and that's the whole idea I was talking about before. A lot of the definitions we have of these things are outdated and obsolete, old-fashioned ways of looking at it. We need a more modern 21st century way of understanding what's happening with all this so that we can use it more consciously and progress and move forward.
This concept of that's been around for thousands of years, the concept of God itself, is it an old paradigm? And are we expanding our consciousness into knowing that we are in essence God itself
Yes,
experiencing itself
exactly. In all the ways that it can.
in all the ways that it can? Yes.
Yes, that's why Bashar refers to God literally as all that is. That's
All
the
the,
way they see it. There is
yeah.
nothing outside of it. Everything is made from it because there's nothing else to make anything from. So we're all reflections of it, aspects of it, experiences of itself that it's having. But it's like he says when he uses the analogy, it's like being standing in the center of a hall of mirrors. You see all the reflections around you. But of course, in this case, all those reflections are also conscious because everything is made of consciousness. So we're all the reflections in the hall of mirrors that God has of looking at itself and experiencing itself. But each of us is an autonomous consciousness because that's the nature of the multidimensional idea of what God, Goddess, all that is. Everything that it is itself a conscious thing and itself from another perspective. So I am you from another point of view is basically the idea of what God is. I am
Yes.
you from another point of view.
ooh, I like that too. And, when you think about the ancient teachings too, the whole idea of mirroring each other, once we realize that we see each other, one another, and the other,
Yeah.
the idea of separateness goes away.
Yeah, it's the holographic principle that science is now talking about. And it's from the old days, what, ancient cultures used to refer to as Indra's net. It's a net of pearls. And in each pearl is the reflection of all the other pearls in the net. So every pearl contains a connection and information of all the pearls in the net, as each of us do. I am you from another point of view. I contain all the information, all the connections that I need to know that helps me become my unique aspect of all that is, while you do the same for you.
Mm. It kind of reminds me of, in spiritual circles, they talk about the Akashic records,
Mhm.
but a scientist and system theorist, Dr. Urban Laszlo, who's also in the series, right? He's a scientist, and he talks about it as the Akash, not to be confused with the Akashic records, but similar, right? And that it's Lynn McTaggart calls it the field, right? Shamini Jane calls it the biofield. Whatever term you want to use for it,
Matter, yeah.
it's in this multidimensional space, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people get confused because they think the Akashic Records is like, it's a place over there or something like that. It's like a special room in the house. It's simply another way of saying that all information is embedded within the fabric of space and time and is accessible to anyone at any point if you're of the vibration and frequency of the information that you seek. You pull it out because you're that vibration. That's what the Akashic Records is. It's just everything embedded in the structure of existence. It's all knowledge, all experience, it's all there. If you're the right frequency, you connect to that particular piece of information because all frequencies and all information operate on different levels of frequency.
Yeah. It's interesting because with our guides, I remember one point where I said, well, we've been trained that you need permission to go into someone's Akashic records. And it was Magdalene, I think, who came through and she said, that's humans' construct, not mine.
Basically,
Or not
yes.
ours. So it's like this idea that, kind of like, as you said, Paul Sella calls it the upper room, whatever you want to call it. If you're in that frequency or
Right.
that vibration to tap into it, you have access.
You do have access. Now, I would say the only thing about that is you definitely, in some ways, need permission to apply it to someone else in the sense of, hey, I got this thing and I want to tell you what I got about you. You have to really respect whether or not it's appropriate for you to share information with someone on their path because they may not be ready for it.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
you have to respect that. And in a sense, that's also what Bashar is doing because he's basically saying any information that would in any way, shape, or form intervene with the path you have decided is important for you, when he comes through, he will not have access to that information to prevent him from mistakenly blowing your Christmas presents, in a sense. You've set up surprises for yourself and lessons for yourself, and there are certain things he can and can't tell you that's not allowed because you yourself have said, I don't want to know this until I experience this because that's how I'm going to learn my lesson. So don't blow my lesson for me. Otherwise, it's
Mhm.
pointless. So you do have to have a level of respect with regard to permission,
Mhm.
but it's not about necessarily accessing the information. It's more about sharing and distributing that information in a way that is respectful of what someone's life path has chosen to be.
Well, I wanted to ask, and I don't know if you do this, but does Bashar have a message for us? Is that something that you typically
Well,
do?
it's the message that he always has for everyone. It's
Yeah.
so important to understand that you need to be yourself. You need to really be your truthful self. It's most people on this planet have been taught to think that being yourself is really difficult. But in fact, trying to be someone you're not is the most difficult thing you can possibly do because you're not that person. You have to be true to yourself, and following your passion is one of the ways that is easiest for you to do that because passion is the message from your soul and your higher mind saying, this is who you are. That's why you're passionate about this. This is the vibration of your true self. Act on it, and it will lead you where you need to be. This is the next step on your journey. That's why this opportunity comes with this excitement, curiosity, passion, love, creativity. It's telling you this is who you are. So pay attention to the signs. Don't ignore them.
Yeah, that's great. That's listed as one of Bashar's top principles. Excitement is the physical translation of the vibrational resonance that is your true core natural being.
Right.
Follow the excitement. I love that. You want to bring up any books for people to
Yeah, I
refer
mean,
to, and then maybe
sure.
also some courses and some things that you're working on?
Yeah. Well, anyone that wants to know anything that's happening with Bashar Communications and events that we've done or will be doing can go to bashar.org, bashar.org. They can access also any of the books that do exist at this particular point. If they want to know anything about what I'm doing, they can literally just go to darrylanka.com, darrylyanka.com to see about what I'm doing and access the escape room or books that I've written. So those two websites are primarily where they can find out anything that I'm doing or anything that Bashar is doing.
Right. Well, is there anything that we've left out, Darryl, that you want to share with our audience? Something that we didn't get to? I mean, I might just put up a little slide so people can see some of the top principles because they're great. And I think they
Yeah.
span across time, they span across traditions, even, right?
Yeah, I think it's just the formula that Bashar shares is really the simplest instruction manual for how to create an accelerated momentum in your life that allows you to experience more effortlessness, more joy, more creativity, more imagination. So I would just suggest that you pay attention as precisely as possible, apply the information that he shares if you feel so inclined, and you will see a difference in your life. So just follow the formula that he shares with all of us is really the most important thing from his perspective that you could possibly do, because he's distilled it down to a very simple 5-step process. And it's not a philosophy, it's literally a description of how reality works, how you create your physical reality experience. So when you have the instruction manual, it makes things a lot easier. That's all he's giving us is that instruction manual.
So lastly, and we never get political on this thing. We just never do that. So we're not going to do that. But people are feeling a little uncertain right now in just in general, right? And so
Yeah.
any words of comfort that you can provide for people, and this is regardless of belief system, but just for people who are feeling, wow, what's going on? There's just a lot of change a
Yeah,
lot.
well, I think it's important to understand that this is what happens when you're at the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. As we say on Earth, it's always darkest before the dawn. You kind of have to get all the chaos out of your system and out in front of you so that you can decide, is this what we prefer to continue, or do we want something else? Do we prefer something else? So it's an opportunity to stay focused, to stay in a positive state, to find the ways to use the apparent chaos and darkness or uncertainty going on in our world right now as a way of crystallizing more strongly what you do prefer and then doing something about it and moving in that direction. So it's about processing what you see, understanding what you prefer, what you don't, and then taking action in the direction of what you prefer. And as we also say, it's easier to see a candle flame when it's surrounded by darkness. So use the dark as a way of showing you more clearly where the light is and move in that direction.
Yeah, and be that beacon, right, for others. Like when we shine, it just
Absolutely.
amplifies and it affects the collective field, the collective
Right.
consciousness.
Be the living example of what it is you wish to experience. Absolutely.
No, that's great. That's awesome. What a treasure this has been, right? What a miraculous treasure this has been. And I love, speaking of miracles, that's another principle from Bashar, that miracles are commonplace. They're not actually miracles.
They're the natural order of things when we allow them. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what a treasure this has been. And Darryl, thank you so much
Thank you. I
for.
appreciate the opportunity and the fact that you have created this outlet in which we can share this kind of information. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And I appreciate you inviting me onto your show. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.